Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Let's Paint a Mini. So we're looking at kind of a unique miniature here. This is actually the Punisher. This is from the Spider-Man miniatures game, I think. Yeah, the Spider-Man miniature game. This is the package that he kind of comes in right here. Hopefully he's gonna sort of look like the back there. Now I'm not that great of a painter, so I don't think he's gonna look that good, but hopefully we can do something simple that pretty much anybody can do, and we'll just relax and do this for a little bit. Kind of doing this because of the upcoming release of the Punisher Netflix series, which is coming out soon. I do look forward to that quite a bit. But as you can see, I've already got a layer of pure black on there. Now I do all of my miniatures with a base coat of black. Now this came pewter, so it kind of had sort of a silver color to it. But I always start off with a layer of pure black. And the thing that I always start off with all of my miniatures is that I'll always do kind of skin tones first, and I'll work my way out contour-wise. So we'll start with this tan skin color right here. Alright, just get a little bit of paint onto my little plastic surface right here. Oh, by the way, I will run all of the colors at the bottom of the screen, or will have run all of the colors at the bottom of the screen so that you know what colors we're going to be using here. Now, I do always tell people, make sure that you use a plastic surface whenever you're putting your paints onto a surface like this, just because if you use a paper surface, that tends to absorb your paint and makes it dry a little bit faster, and that's something you want to avoid. I'm using a Reaper small size standard brush here. This is just a 0 scale brush, and we're just going to go over all of the skin points. I do like to start with the face, so let's do that first. The thing that I always like to tell people when it comes to painting miniatures is to just take your time, because this is a pretty high detailed miniature right here too, so you really want to be careful about everything that you do. And you can do it as long as you've got the right size brushes and goodwill and some patience, and you can crank out a nice little miniature here that'll be nice and simple. I do want to leave the eyes black for now, because when we go over them with white later on, having just a little bit of a black sort of ring around the eyes will help to kind of bring out the eyes a little bit. Okay, that's coming along pretty well here. There's just a little bit of a spot underneath his jaw here. That's his neck. I think we've got the face down there pretty well. Let's move on to this arm right here. When you're doing a really high detailed miniature like this, the first few steps where you just need to do kind of base coats of different colors all over the whole miniature, it takes a while. It is going to take a lot longer than just doing really basic kind of plastic form miniatures. Now, if you've looked at my YouTube channel and you've looked at excuse me, if you've looked at miniature videos of the Doom miniatures being painted, those are really nice miniatures. I don't want to knock those, but they're much simpler and they're much easier in design overall. So you don't need to focus on so many little tiny details when you're doing the Doom miniatures. But because this miniature is very sensitive detail-wise, you kind of just want to take your time with it. You want to make sure that it looks super good, because you're not just doing a dozen imps here. You've only got one Punisher, so you really want to make them look good. Just take your time. Another thing that I'm doing, as I'm sure you see here, I'm actually leaving the sort of like inner crack that makes his mouth, the seal of his lips. I'm leaving that as black just because you can see the mouth line a little bit more clearly, and it just kind of stands out. Okay, let's move on to the other arm from here. my line here separating his shirt from his arm here is not very well established. That's because I didn't super glue it on here very well. The mold didn't quite fit together. Oh, that's one thing that I also neglected to mention before I started painting him, was that I actually had to assemble this miniature. His head was not there, and neither were his arms, and his arms attached at different points. And so I had to super glue them on there, and the points of connection separating his arm and his shirt here, they weren't very clear, cut clear on there. So I did my best to blend them, but yeah, there's just a great big crack on the bottom of his elbow here. You can kind of see, but that's okay. We just do the best with what we have, and we make the best of it, and it'll turn out just fine. I think so, at least. And I think we've got his skin tone down there. So let's move on. I'm going to rinse off my brush really quickly. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move on to highlight those skin points that we just did. So I'm going to take this tanned highlight color, just get a little bit of paint on my little plastic surface here. It's just a lighter shade of that tan. And then I'm going to take this small-sized Citadel dry brush. The thing about dry brushing is that the bristles are much longer and much thicker. And the way that dry brushing works is that you want to get a little bit of paint onto the tip of your brush, a decent amount of paint. You want to load up the paint onto the bristles of your brush, but then you want to actually wipe off most of it, and you want to make it so that you've got paint on your brush, but most of it is actually dry. That's why they call it dry brushing. As you can see, I've got paint on there, but it's not a whole lot, and it's not very wet. And then you're just going to brush over all of the skin parts that you just did, and that will give some highlights to all of the skin tones. Now, one thing is that you're probably going to get a little bit of this skin color, this highlight color, onto the other points of the miniature, like onto the gun and onto the clothes and all that, onto his hair and all that. No big deal. After we do this step, we'll actually just touch up those same areas with some pure black again, and then we'll go from there. Now, the thing about dry brushing, especially with a miniature that's as detailed as this, all of these sort of low contours of the miniature, like the muscle lines here, you don't want to go with those lines like this. You actually want to go against them like this. And that way, the low contours will actually stay that darker tan skin color, and then the high contours will be lightly colored. And that gives some realistic depth and realistic lighting that you're looking for. With the fingers here, for example, I don't want to go along the fingers. I don't want to go with them like this. I want to go against the fingers like this. There we go. It's looking nice. Let's go ahead and do his face here. There we go. That brings out his face nice and well. As you can see, I was kind of coming from the bottom up, and that will get the line of his chin and his ears a little bit. Whoa! Be careful with him. Okay. Just get his forehead there a little bit. The bridge of his nose going this way. I think that's a pretty good looking face there. I think that looks alright. Okay. And let's do this other arm. Like I said, the sort of seam connecting his arm there is kind of ugly, but that's okay. I think it'll be all right, and we'll just make the best of it, and it'll look fine. We're okay with it. I think that looks nice and good. All right, let's stick with that. Now I'm going to rinse off my brush real quick. You don't want to have the paint fully dry onto your dry brush. All right, and then I'm going to go back to my pure black here. Just get a little bit of paint on my surface right here. Alright, and using that same brush that we were using before, let's just touch up all of the areas that we might have gotten a little bit of that highlight color onto. So like his hair here, his hairline has a little bit of tan color going on here, and we don't actually want that. He's got very dark hair. So let's just go over that. Okay, then I think we've got our nice defining lines there again. And let's move on to the next step, I think. Touch up this sleeve here a little bit. Alright, rinse off that brush. Alright, now Frank Castle very famously wears all black as his Punisher getup. But whenever you have a character that's wearing all black like this, you don't just want to leave it as a flat black because, well, then it looks. Oh, you know what? Oh shoot. Okay. So one thing that I have neglected to mention, and I try to make this a point, and that's that whenever you're in between steps for a miniature, always do a once over of your miniature when you're in between steps of painting. Because sometimes you might miss things. You see how I've got a little bit of that tanned highlight onto his belt here? Let's just go over that really quickly. So after each step that you do, just kind of look over the whole miniature. Look for little tiny imperfections that you can just kind of touch up, and it's easier to do that while you've still got paint on your brush and while your paint is still wet than it is to, you know, find it later on and then have to go over it, you know, in the middle of doing stuff. So just kind of look over the whole thing from all sides, all angles. That'll be fine. Okay. Rinse that off one more time. Alright, but like I was saying, you never want to just leave it as flat black because then it just kind of looks a little bit flat. You don't really have a lot of depth. So you want to do something to kind of bring out the high contours and kind of highlight some stuff. So I'm going to move on to this muddy olive color. It's a really, really dark green color. And it's actually just going to give a little tiny bit of a green kind of tint to the black that he's wearing, and I feel like that's something that would be pretty faithful to the character. I think that even the art on the package even kind of shows like there's just a little bit of green going on there, so we're gonna go with that. And my paint is kind of dried on my nozzle there, so if that ever happens, all you need to really do is just take kind of a safety pin like this, just kind of poke it into the nozzle. Maybe spin it around a little bit, and then just kind of poke it back up, and hopefully that should clear out your nozzle a little bit and you can get your paint out. There we go. That'll be fine. And I'm going to move on back to my small size dry brush. Alright, we're just going to use our same sort of dry brushing method here. And we are just going to go ahead and dry brush over all of the sort of combat fatigues, all of the clothes. Yeah, there we go. And that just kind of helps to bring out just a little bit of depth in his outfit overall. But it still gives a nice, dark, almost black kind of thing. That just kind of brings out his getup a little bit more. It gives it a little bit of depth. Looks nice and good. Okay, what's the next thing that I want to move on to? You know what? Let's make sure that we get the top of this sleeve here. Kind of hard to reach with the stock of his gun right there. Okay, I think that'll be fine. Alright, rinse that brush off. Alright, and I think the next thing that I want to do actually is I want to move on to all of the sort of like harnesses and pockets that he's got, and I imagine those just being a really, really basic brown color. So we're going to move on to this earth brown. Oh man, all of my paints are dried up. So once again, I'm just going to take another little safety pin right here. Just kind of poke into the top of my nozzle. I think that should free things up a little bit. Let's do that. Beautiful. There we go. Alright, and I'll just move back to that first brush that I was using, that small-sized standard round brush here. Alright, and basically, like I said, all of the sort of harnesses and pockets and all that, we'll just lightly go over with this brown color. It's raining outside right now. Sorry, I've got my my window open, and it's raining outside, so if you can hear that while I'm talking, sorry about that, but I like to think that the sound of rain just brings a little bit of a sense of kind of serenity and peace, and I'm okay with the noise as long as you are. But yeah, we're just doing all of the magazine pouches right here. And I think that pouch on the side of his leg is actually just part of his pants, because you can see there's no kind of belt or holster that's holding it up, so I'm just going to leave that the way that it is. There we go, I think that looks okay. Alright, and then he's got the one kind of vest holster. I don't know what you call it, shoulder holsters up here. Let's just go over these. There we go. I think we've got those holsters. We've got the first coat of those down. All right, I'm gonna rinse off my brush. All right, the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna just bring out some highlights on those pouches a little bit more. So we're gonna be doing more of our dry brushing, and we're gonna move on to my very favorite shade of brown here. This is leather brown. Don't need very much paint for this step, so I just got a little tiny dot there. Once again, going back to my dry brush, just loading up the bristles, but wiping off most of the paint. And then just really lightly go over all the brown bits that you just did. There we go. Just really lightly getting a little bit of that leather brown to highlight the high contours on all those brown bits that we just did there, and that looks pretty solid. Alright, and I think the next thing that we're going to do actually is that we're going to move on to this rainy gray color. The color is faded off on the bottle here, but this is rainy gray. I'm doing a couple of things with this. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take, let's see, do I want to do first step or the second? Tell you what, let's get a little bit more out than that. And before we move on to what I was about to do, I'm going to move on to my medium-sized Reaper round brush. This is just a 1-scale Reaper round brush, a little bit bigger. Okay, so we're going to move on with this, and I'm going to load this up, and I'm actually just going to do all of the base. Yeah. And I'm kind of thinking the base can just be kind of like, it could be one of two things. It could be kind of granite, or it could be just, you know, basic, you know, mountain stone kind of thing, because it doesn't quite look like city street rubble. I'm honestly not sure what the base is supposed to be. It's just kind of a stony looking, I don't know, maybe it is supposed to be like a road that's been destroyed or something like that, but we're just going to take this rainy gray, and we're just going to go over the whole base. Okay, I've got that base nice and stony looking there. Okay, I'm gonna rinse off the brush that I just used, but using that same paint, I'm gonna go back to my dry brush actually. Load up that paint nice and thick. Well, actually, I don't want a whole lot of paint onto the brush, like even a small amount for dry brushing. because I'm actually going to go over his hair a little bit here. Now, his hair streaks go back like this. You know, they just go back against his head like this. So I'm going to go against those streaks because I want, again, the high contours to be just a little bit gray, but I want the low contours to still be black. Just really, really lightly go over this. There we go, and that just kind of brings out his hair streaks a little bit more. A little bit nice and bright. Besides, the Punisher is it's kind of older in the comics, I think. I mean, his original story was basically a Vietnam vet. Well, in theory, if he's still around today, he's going to be an old man. You know, when his comics were at a high, you know, it was in the, I want to say that it was in the 80s and 90s, back when Vietnam vets were a lot younger. Anyway, sorry. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the exact same kind of thing, but go over his boot laces here. And I want to bring out those boot laces just a little tiny bit. Yeah, the character of the Punisher in the Netflix, Marvel universe, obviously is different because I think that he's like an Iraq vet. Obviously, they wanted to make him younger for to fit with the current generation, current audience. When they first showed him in season 2, I loved him. I thought he was really, really, really well done. Yeah, really, really handled well. I liked season 2 of Daredevil quite a bit, but, and this is just an opinion. I don't think that it's fact or anything like that. As a whole, I don't think that season 2 of Daredevil is quite as good as season 1, and that's purely because of the Hand and Elektra. I honestly think that they're not very well done there. Sorry, what I'm also doing with this gray is that I'm dry brushing the assault rifle here. But yeah, Elektra and the Hand, I just don't think were expressed very well and told very well. Whereas everything with the Punisher, everything with Karen, everything with the editor that she worked with about season 2 of Daredevil was beautiful. It was gold. I loved it. So I'm really looking forward to the Punisher TV series that Netflix is doing. I know that it's got a tentative release date of this year, but they haven't announced an actual date yet. Either way, I will be watching, and I will definitely love it. I love the Punisher. The Punisher was probably my favorite Marvel character. When I was in high school, I read the graphic novel Welcome Back, Frank, and I loved it. It was just so much fun. It was a great callback to 80s action heroes and just the crazy over-the-top nature of it, and just the fun factor that it had and the sheer brutality of it. I love the Punisher. I'm on board with the Punisher. I forget. I've also got an older graphic novel of his, another collection of comics where he escaped from prison, and I forget what it was called. That was a really good one too. Yeah, I've actually read Punisher comics. I haven't just seen the movies. So I like to think that I'm a decent Punisher fan, but anyway. So let's move on. After I've dry brushed the boots, the machine gun, his hair, I think the next thing that I'm gonna do, let's see. I'll save white for last. Let's go ahead and do the, let's go ahead and move on to my honed steel color here. We'll move back on to my dry brush. Let's go ahead and go over his magnum here. Now, because I did the machine gun with that gray color, when I go over that, the assault rifle with this steel color, it's going to be a little bit brighter, but that's okay because I'm okay with having the two different guns having two different shades of steel, because if they're made differently and they're manufactured differently, then they might look different. So we'll just do regular honed steel with the looks like a 44 Magnum right here. Yeah, I'm not very gun savvy. I really don't know a lot about guns. So I assume this is a 44 Magnum, but I don't know for sure. I think that looks pretty good. I'm gonna go over the butt or the handle of the revolver with the different color, but we'll do that in a little bit. So let's do the same thing with the assault rifle here. One thing that I'm also noticing while I'm in this step is that I forgot to paint the trigger finger with that tan skin color, so I'll probably do that just to kind of touch up at the end. Okay, but there we go. That looks pretty good. I don't think I need anything else to be silver with the dry brush, so I'm going to rinse off that brush. And I'll go back to that small-sized brush that I was using earlier, and he's got these little grenades, flash grenades, on his chest, on those little shoulder holsters. So I'm just going to really lightly get those. Oh no, my cats are arguing pretty angrily. Well, that got heated, but I think it's okay now. Brought out those grenades on his chest a little bit. I think you've got a regular looking grenade right here. And then I think that is a flashbang. Alright, I'm gonna rinse that brush off. Alright, and next up, I'm gonna move on to my itty bitty teeny tiny micro detail brush here. It's so tiny it barely even shows up on camera. Look at that. And I'm going to use that to go over a couple of things. On the little pouches, on the little magazines, you can kind of see some sort of buttons to kind of latch the tops of those on there. So I'm just going to poke a little bit of this steel color onto each of those little buttons. If you really want to have fun with it too, you can actually just use like a gold color, and you can go over each of those with gold as well, and that would look pretty good too. But that's up to you. I think I'm going to go with silver here. And I think that buckle in the center of his belt. There we go. Then he's got some little buckles onto this holster here as well. There we go. That looks pretty good. All right. And to be honest, I think, yeah, we're almost done. We're actually getting into the home stretch here. So the last, well, not last, but the next thing that we're going to move on to is I'm going to use just pure white. This is another bottle where the paint is faded off, but this is pure white. And while that paint is still nice and wet, I'm going to go right back to my small detail brush. I rinsed it off, but this is the part where you want to be super careful, because let's get super brave and let's do his eyes. You just need a little bit of paint onto the tip of your brush. And you just want to rest your hands onto a table or a desk or something like that to hold your hands nice and steady. And then just really lightly poke each eye. And there's two. There we go. He's got some actual eyes now. All right. That's probably the hardest part of the entire miniature. Well, that or the pupils, which we'll do in a minute. But if you've got the eyes down, you can do anything. There we go. I think that looks perfect. That'll work out. That's good. Okay. And the next thing that I'm going to do is, well, he's got that skull on his chest. Let's just do it. I'm going to use this tiny detailed brush here just to make sure that we're nice and careful about it. And take your time with this. Now luckily the sculpt of this miniature has the skull already kind of carved out. So you can, you've got lines that give you kind of a point of reference as to where you should put your paint. So you've got an advantage there. But just be really careful and just take your time with this. Just for the sake of fun facts here, I know that the Punisher actually first appeared, I'm sure all you die-hard Punisher fans know this, but for anyone who doesn't know, he actually first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man. Forget the issue number, but it was actually kind of an interesting thing, because it was at a time where comics were kind of becoming, you know, too dark for a lot of you know, TV households and all that, and so there was some censorship going on and that kind of thing. Well, anyway, there was a comic, there was a storyline in the Amazing Spider-Man. I forget the specifics, but for some reason, the whole thing was that it was just a guy with guns and training, and it was just a scary guy, and he just wanted to murder people, basically. Well, not murder people, but murder very specific people. Well, anyway, I guess he was trying to kill one specific guy that Spider-Man ended up needing to protect for some reason. I might be remembering this a little bit off. Look it up, because it's an interesting thing. But I think, if I recall correctly, Spider-Man's protecting some guy, and the Punisher's trying to kill him. And then, like, at the end of it, I think the Punisher realized that the guy was actually innocent of whatever he was, like, being charged with or was accused of, or whatever the reason was, and he and Spider-Man kind of found a peace, but it still was just a very it was a rough storyline for Spider-Man. Well, anyway, Stan Lee apparently wanted to call him the Assassin, not the Punisher, the Assassin. But I guess when he proposed the name and the character to you know, the powers that be, or whomever. I don't know what the appropriate analogy would be then, but like today it would be if you know, said to your producer, okay, you know, if you're a director of a movie and you said to your producer, we're going to do this character and this, and here's the dynamic, and the producer said, okay, well, you know what, you can't do that. It was kind of like that. So Stan Lee said, we're going to call him the Assassin, and I guess the powers that be said, you can't do that because you can't infer that this character kills people. And they were like, well, that's the point. And they were like, yeah, but we can't do that because, you know, people are on the fence about comics right now. You know, people were blaming comics for, you know, the violent behaviors and stuff of kids. So they had to figure out a way to clean it up. And so they said, all right, fine. Well, how about he's just called the Punisher, and then in this comic he doesn't actually kill anyone. And that's why, you know, he and Spider-Man, like, found peace or whatever at the end of the comic. And I guess they were like, okay, that's fine. Well, you know, flash forward a few years, and, you know, all of a sudden it becomes a little bit more free game to kind of do and say specific things. And they were like, let's resurrect that Punisher character. And that's kind of how the Punisher came to be. But yeah, he was originally called the Assassin, and the only reason they changed it to the Punisher was because you know, again, the powers that be, I don't know who they were at the time, just said, no, you can't do that because you can't infer that he kills people. And that's just kind of an interesting kind of history lesson on the origin of the Punisher. Okay. It's not perfect, but I think that'll work. Yeah, it's really detailed, so it's just really tricky. But just take your time with it, and I think you'll be fine. There we go. That'll do it. Okay. So once you've got the skull, once you've got the eyes, the last thing that you're going to do with this white is you're going to finish touching up that base. So I'm going to go back to my dry brush here. I'm going to load up, you know, my dry brush with this white. Once again, wipe off most of it. And then that base that we did, all with rainy gray, let's just go over that whole thing with this pure white. And this way it kind of looks like it's got a nice granite kind of mountainside sort of feel, or, you know, maybe it could just be basic rubble, whatever. You know, I think that the design of this was just supposed to be kind of open to interpretation. And because of that, honestly, you can do whatever color scheme that you want. I am rather partial to this gray and white here. What you can also just do is just pure black and then dry brush gray over it. You could take, you know, earth brown and leather brown. You know, just kind of whatever color scheme that you like, just kind of do a base coat of a darker color and then dry brush a lighter color over it. And as long as you stick to that rule, I think that whatever you decide to crank out will be fine. we go. I think that looks pretty solid. Okay. And yeah, we're almost done. Let's just touch up with some small little tiny details. What I'll do is I'll move on to this chestnut brown color. Doesn't actually say on the bottle here because this was actually a free sample that Reaper Miniatures sent me whenever I did like a bulk order of miniatures some years back. I think it's chestnut brown. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's chestnut brown. It's just a brown color with a little tiny bit of a sort of red tint to it. And I think that will make a really nice, I think that will make a nice butt of the gun, of that revolver. Alright, my paint in that nozzle is also dried up nice and dry, so I'm just going to take my little safety pin here and just kind of poke in the top a little bit, just like I do. There we go. Don't need a whole lot of paint, just getting a little tiny droplet out. I will go ahead and use that fine detail brush since we've already got the fingers and stuff on there, but I'm just going to, you know, take that handle of that Magnum and just kind of go over that. There we go. We just got that handle nice and brown there. I think that'll be all right. Okay. Get that brush off there. Okay. I will take my my tan skin again real quick, just a little tiny drop, because like I said, I forgot the trigger finger on that assault rifle, so I'll just take my my high detailed brush here, poke a little bit there. There we go. That looks fine. That'll work out just fine. All right, and we're almost done. Let me just really quickly get out a little bit more of the pure black here. If the eyes weren't the trickiest part, then this is the trickiest part. It's the actual pupils on the eye. So, once again, take out your little tiny micro detail brush here. You need even less paint onto this brush. And just poke, decide where he's looking. And just do that. There we go. Looks like he's kind of glaring off to the side. He's kind of glaring at his right side there. Maybe he should be staring at where he's aiming, but that's okay. That'll be fine. Okay. Alright. And one thing that I like to do with all of my miniatures is I do like to take this matte varnish right here. This is just a basic brand of varnish here that can be applied evenly across the whole miniature. But you want to use this stuff because it helps to just kind of protect the paint on the miniature, and it helps with the colors too. It kind of brightens up your brighter colors, and it darkens your darker colors, and it just makes everything look a little bit nicer. So we're just going to go over the entire mini with this matte varnish, and for this one I am just using some random old rough shaped brush here. You don't really want to use really nice brushes when you're doing this because this varnish can kind of chew up your brushes a little bit. So like I said, I'm just kind of using an older brush here that I don't really mind if it gets chewed up a little bit more or anything like that. You know, one thing I do want to mention really quickly, I guess, my wife and I, Riley, we just saw the first 3 episodes of Star Trek Discovery, because we actually have CBS All Access. We got it a long time ago because we like to watch Stephen Colbert's show, but you know, we don't really get to stay up that late. So we got it a while ago, actually, and I'm glad that we did, because Star Trek Discovery is great. It's really, really good. I'm honestly kind of surprised at how good it is. I expected it to be decent, but it's quality television. I do fully recommend that if you want to watch it, please get CBS All Access. They're not paying me any money to say that or nothing like that. I'm just some random guy on YouTube here, but I mean, for real though, it's a great show. It's meaningful. It is the perfect complement to the Orville right now. That's on Fox, and it's just a heck of a time to be a Star Trek fan right now, because you've got Star Trek Discovery and you've got the Orville, and they're both just perfect continuations of the legacy of Star Trek. So if you get the chance, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to spoil anything, but it's a very, very good show. And I would say that if you were thinking about fleshing out the money for CBS All Access to get Discovery, please do it, because that show practically needs our support. And I love it. It's great. Now, if you weren't really thinking about it, but if you weren't on the fence about it and you were still kind of thinking about it, maybe look up the show first to get some more specific details. But I don't want to talk about them here. If you want, I can talk about that in a future video or something like that. But I love Star Trek Discovery. It's really, really good. But yeah, maybe look up reviews, look up more specific things about it before you decide to bite the bullet on it. But it's very, very good, and I'm very, very happy that we got to see it. Okay, so after I've got that matte varnish on there, the very last thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move on to another brand of paint here called Game Color. This is Negro Black. And the reason why I'm actually using this brand is because it's not quite a gloss, but it's got a very glossy look to it. And what I want to do is his boots. Because I imagine him being, a soldier, and I know that one thing that soldiers need to do is they need to make sure that their gear is in good shape and that they've got nice shiny boots. And so I just imagine that his boots are going to be really, really, really nice looking. So we're just going to use this color for his boots. Doesn't really matter what type of brush you want to use, as long as it's just one that you like and that you're comfortable with. All right. And I think that'll about do it. There you go. There's a nice little bit of shine in his boots there. And I think that is about what I will call it with the Punisher. So there you go. That's the Punisher from the Spider-Man miniature game. If you like this video, go ahead and throw it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be doing a lot more of miniature painting and more nerdy hobby stuff like that. Looking into different board games to maybe get right now for different miniatures to be painted. But yeah, thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time on Let's Paint a Mini. Bye.